Chapter 441. There was a thud on the other end of the line as if something heavy had hit the ground. Then, Ethan's voice sounded in disbelief. What did you just say? Pregnant. She's taking folic acid. If she's not pregnant, why would she take something like that? Ethan gritted his teeth. Are you sure you're not seeing things? Come on, I know I grew up overseas, but I can still read Arlandian. I know how to read folic acid. The call ended at that moment. Henry frowned. He wondered what had happened with Ethan, for Ethan didn't make sense these days. Everly dashed toward Olivia, stuffing the folic acid into the latter's hands. Don't forget to add this to your vitamins. Thanks. No need for thanks. You have to give birth to a healthy baby, all right. Everly patted Olivia on the shoulder. Olivia nodded. As if thinking of something, she asked, no one saw you, right? Don't worry, I'm very fast. This packaging is so fancy that dumb man won't understand what it is at all. Olivia didn't have much of an impression about Henry. So, she concluded that he wasn't involved with Ethan. It was only then that she sighed in relief. Good. Rest well, and don't work too hard. Okay, you should take good care of yourself, too. I'll visit you when I have days off. Just call me if something comes up. Don't be shy to trouble me. I'm even worried that you're not giving me enough trouble. Olivia replied, okay. The two exchanged glances. Olivia tossed the packaging into the trash can. Then, she put the folic acid into a vitamin bottle before she left. She felt much better at the thought of her child. Even the blue sky and white clouds outside looked much nicer. She even bought some of her favorite cakes and coffee on the streets before going back. After having a child, she only wanted to share wonderful things with them. In her heart, she talked to the child. Baby, this is my favorite coffee. Do you like it? Also, I've been a fan of this mousse cake for a decade. When you're born, I'll buy some for you too. Are you a boy or a girl? Will you have a sweet tooth? She would retch a little before this. But after eating the desserts, her condition was relieved. The child seemed to share the same tastes as her. She didn't feel nauseous at all. As she thought more about it, she started visualizing a baby with a sweet smile. Olivia started to see meaning in life. A cold voice sounded, what are you smiling about? You look quite happy. Olivia shivered. She was so absorbed in her fantasies that she didn't notice Ethan nearing her. Unable to stop smiling in time, she looked at him a little guiltily. She didn't know why she would feel guilty, either. Ethan was the one who owed her anyway. What does that have to do with you? Do you have a problem with me smiling? She retorted as usual. She wondered if she was seeing things, but she felt as if Ethan's gaze was questioning her somehow. Where did you go today? Olivia was even more furious now. You sent bodyguards, didn't you? Just ask them about it instead of asking me. Why should I tell you, anyway? Do I not have the right to leave the house anymore? You shouldn't have broken my hand. You should break my legs instead so that I will never leave the house. If she said the same things in the past, Ethan would try to coax and soothe her. But now, the man's quiet voice rang out. I quite want to do that. Stunned, Olivia looked up at Ethan. She only saw the cold and obsessed look in his eyes. It felt like a beast that had locked onto its prey. Olivia felt her hair standing on end. Uneasiness began to spread in her heart. Chapter 442. Olivia instinctively put her hand on her tummy. But then, she feared that Ethan would notice it, so she hastily retracted her hand. But her movements only attracted even more attention. Ethan saw all that. As he slowly walked toward her, Olivia's heartbeat quickened. When Ethan's hand touched her back, she felt as if everything just exploded. She had goosebumps all over her. Fear spread from the spot he touched to her entire body. She suppressed her panic, trying her best to look calm. What are you doing? You seem to be scared of me, Liv. Olivia gulped. Then, she said in a cold voice, it's disgust, not fear. Ethan, has anyone ever told you that you're annoying? Since you're going to marry Marina soon, stop messing around with me. Ethan slowly bent over, his authoritative air looming over Olivia. He whispered in Olivia's ear, Liv, you're very nervous. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. A bead of sweat rolled down Olivia's forehead. Even she wasn't sure why she would be so scared. Perhaps because the previous child had shocked her too much, she subconsciously felt that Ethan had ill intentions. The best way for her to protect this child was to avoid unnecessary trouble. The less people knew about it, the safer the child would be. Reaching out, Olivia shoved him away. "Ethan, I don't have time to fool around with you. It's getting late, so I want to rest now." With that, she pulled away the blanket, turning her back to Ethan as usual. She placed her hand on her chest, feeling her obvious heartbeat. She was truly scared, so much so that she didn't even realize she was trembling. Fortunately, Ethan didn't say much more. As always, he pulled the blanket over her body. He even patted her gently on the back. "Then I won't disturb your rest anymore." With that, he stood up. His gaze fell upon the vitamin bottle, which stood out on the bedside table. He looked away after a splitting second. Hearing the soft click of the door closing, Olivia finally let out a sigh of relief. She wiped the sweat on her forehead. She was even more convinced now that she wasn't suited to be the bad guy. Ethan didn't do anything at all, but she almost exposed herself. Unbeknownst to Olivia, Ethan frowned deeply as soon as he closed the door. The light in his eyes instantly went out, and he became extremely cold. Henry wasn't lying. It was very likely that something was off about Olivia. The person at the end of the corridor saw him, but they didn't stop walking. Instead, they walked even faster. "Stop right there." Mona Cinder was caught in the act. With a pale face, she stood where she was and greeted, "Mr. Miller." "Raise your head." Mona had no choice but to do as she was told. Ethan's voice was cold. "I remember that you're in charge of the flower bed. There were quite a lot of workers in the Manor of Roses." Ethan had personally selected every single worker's documents. So, he vaguely remembered each of them. Mona was dumbfounded. She didn't expect Ethan to remember a minor character like her. "Yes, Miss Fordham can't move her hand well. So, she asked me to take care of her after she noticed how attentive I am." A cold gleam flashed across Ethan's eyes. "Come with me." Mona was scared to death. She didn't know what Ethan was planning, so she had no choice but to follow him. Ethan would come over every day, but she was still scared of this man who never looked them in the eye. She followed Ethan into the study. Ethan took a seat while she remained standing. Mona recalled the only time she got caught skipping school. She now had the same expression as when she was brought to the office back then. She didn't dare make a sound, and she didn't even dare to look up. She was a working adult now, but she had never spoken to Ethan in person. While she was still thinking, Ethan said, "Talk." Chapter 443. Ethan had only uttered one word, but Mona's knees went weak. Dropping to the floor, Mona said, "Mr. Miller, I'll tell you everything." Ethan frowned, thinking that Mona gave in a little too soon. He hadn't even pressured her. "Go ahead. I felt that it was a pity to throw away the roses we trimmed from the garden, so I sold them at night for $1 each. I didn't mean to be greedy. I just need money, and my grandmother has gotten sick, too." "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller. I won't do that again." Ethan frowned even deeper. "That's what you wanted to say." Mona wiped her tears. "There's more. I'll tell you everything. When I was trimming the trees, my hand slipped, and I accidentally trimmed the heart shape into an apple. Mr. Miller, please don't question my work etiquette. I was just a little feverish that day." Holding his fingers against his forehead, Ethan had a look of annoyance on his face. "What nonsense are you talking about? I'm asking you to tell me about Liv. You've been taking care of her these days. Did you find something off about her?" Mona wiped the sweat on her forehead. "Miss Fordham, she has had a small appetite lately. And, that's all. Miss Fordham has always been a cold person, so she rarely talks to us." Mona remembered what Olivia told her. She would never betray Olivia so easily. But then, Ethan said, "Why didn't you tell me earlier that she couldn't eat because of her pregnancy? What if something happens to the child in her tummy?" Mona widened her eyes. "Mr. Miller, did you already know that Miss Fordham is pregnant? She even told me to keep it a secret. She had just graduated, so she hadn't been weathered by society. So, Ethan managed to trick her right away. Ethan's heart sank. As expected, Henry was right. Olivia had truly gotten pregnant. Ethan didn't let any emotions appear on his face. Of course, she can't hide anything from me. Since she doesn't want me to know, then I'll pretend I know nothing as well. Don't tell her anything in case it affects her mood. Mona agreed. That's true. Pregnant women have unstable moods. I could feel that Miss Fordham has had very obvious mood swings lately. She would smile one moment and then get anxious the next. What is she anxious about? I have no idea. Perhaps it was because of the strong nausea caused by her new pregnancy. Also, Mona glanced at Ethan. She knows that you're going to marry Miss Carlton, so she's probably feeling uneasy. Back when my mom had her second pregnancy, she was very anxious, and she always felt insecure. Mr. Miller, your relationship with Miss Fordham right now may cause extreme nervousness. Ethan frowned deeply. Did you just say that she has severe nausea? Yes, I heard from Miss Fordham that it's even worse than her last pregnancy. She couldn't eat anything, but she forced herself to eat for the sake of her child. Sometimes, she would throw up right after eating, but she didn't care. She would even throw up while eating. I can see that she cares a lot about this baby. Hearing those words, Ethan wondered what he was doing when Olivia had her first pregnancy. Before she got pregnant, he once told her that he wanted her to have his child. On the day when she showed him her pregnancy test report, she leapt into his arms like an overjoyed child. But back then, he was still grieving Leia's death. He felt that Olivia's smile was mocking him, and he didn't like it at all. He couldn't face Olivia, so he stayed out and drowned himself in alcohol. He had no idea that Olivia would throw up during pregnancy. Other than throwing up, what symptoms does she have? Chapter 444. Mona gave Ethan a weird look. She could see that Ethan was being very considerate and nice toward Olivia recently. He was about to marry Marina, but everyone in the Manor of Roses could see that he was sincere toward Olivia. Mona was surprised that Ethan didn't even know about his wife's pregnancy symptoms. I heard from Miss Fordham that she didn't have much experience back then. The nausea lasted for 3 months, and the baby didn't seem to be developing well. In the early stages of pregnancy, women should get progesterone injections every day. My mom got those injections, too, and she said it's very painful. But Miss Fordham looked forward to that child very much. There wasn't any fetal heartbeat even after more than 40 days. The doctor advised against keeping the child, asking her to get an abortion. But she begged the doctor to wait another week. She was terrified in those few days. It was a good thing that she persevered. The fetal heartbeat was detected after more than 50 days of her pregnancy. At that, Mona sighed. But Miss Fordham was quite unlucky. She suddenly bled when she was more than 2 months pregnant. She was startled. She had to be hospitalized for a week for the child to be saved. Mona's words painted a picture in Ethan's mind, filling in the blanks of the period he ignored on purpose. He couldn't imagine what Olivia felt when she went for injections every day. She was such a pampered woman. He remembered her sobbing as she called him. It was during her first pregnancy test, and the doctor said that the child was not developing well. She had asked him what she should do. He remembered his reply back then. He was annoyed by just the sound of her voice. At the mention of the child, he recalled the fetus in Jodi's body. He had turned the fetus into a specimen before it was even fully developed. He had spoken in a cold and cruel voice, "If you can't save the child, just let them go." He hung up right after that. He had ignored the despair Olivia felt on the other end of the line. Back then, she was just an overgrown child pampered by Jeff and Ethan. She hadn't even matured enough, so she couldn't possibly shoulder a mother's responsibility. She used to be a woman who would ask him to kiss the pain of vaccine injections away. She was such a tender and dramatic woman. But later on, she didn't even tell him about the progesterone injections she took every day. When she was more than 2 months pregnant, she looked for him in the bar. She asked him to go home with her. Back then, he had ignored the fact that she was pregnant. He told her to wait for him in the corridor on the wintry night. It was then that she almost lost the child. When he saw her pale face, his mind was filled with torture instead of heartache. She must have been so terrified when she was trying to get her child saved in the hospital. He didn't know how she managed to survive that snowy night. Mona spoke briefly, but Ethan felt as if his heart was filled with pins and needles, which pierced him time and again. His voice was hoarse. What else? Mona thought that he was getting tired of her talkativeness. When she saw the guilt in his eyes, she was convinced that he had done terrible things to Olivia. But now, he was trying to make up for it. It would explain why Olivia hated him so much now. The flame of justice burned in Mona's heart. She didn't withhold anything. She described to Ethan how Olivia behaved when Olivia told her about the pregnancy. Ethan never expected that he would learn about Olivia's pregnancy from someone else. He didn't realize how much suffering she had experienced in the 1 year he ignored her. She was right. He deserved to die. Are you still listening, Mr. Miller? Continue. Miss Fordham seems to like the child very much. Her symptoms in the early stages are even worse than the last pregnancy. But she gritted her teeth and held on. My heart aches every time I see her throwing up so violently. Mr. Miller, why don't you be nicer to her? I'm seriously heartbroken to see Miss Fordham like that. Chapter 445. Ethan had heard many people say the same thing. They all wanted him to treat Olivia better. But in the end, he still forced Olivia into her current situation. All right, I understand. She's wary of me, so she doesn't want me to know that she's pregnant. You don't have to tell her anything, just take care of her. If there's something odd about her, just tell me. I will do my best to meet her needs in the manner of roses. Mona replied, understood, Mr. Miller. I knew that your love for Miss Fordham was real. The simple-minded Mona didn't even realize that she had fully betrayed Olivia. You may leave now. After the door of the study closed, Ethan put a hand to his forehead. He dialed Chris Atkin's number with his other hand. Mr. Miller, did something happen to your wife this late at night? Chris was already used to it by now. He knew that if Ethan called him, the matter would usually concern Olivia. Staring at the streetlights in the distance, Ethan was silent for a few seconds. Then, he asked slowly, when's the best time to get an abortion after a woman has gotten pregnant by accident? Chris had just taken a sip of wine. When he heard those words, he almost choked on the wine. What did you just say? Abortion. Is she pregnant? Answer me. Ethan's tone was forceful. Chris carelessly wiped his mouth with his sleeve. There'll be an ultrasound scan 6 weeks after she stopped getting her period. That's the best time. You can choose to use drugs or get an operation. If it's the drugs, it's best to do it within 7 weeks. If you go the operation route, then it's about 40 to 60 days after getting pregnant. Noticing the silence over the phone, Chris hastily added, is your wife the one getting pregnant? If it's her, I have to give you a word of advice. You know her condition after she gave birth last time. She lost a lot of blood, and she almost died. Her body is very weak from that experience, and it's not easy for her to get pregnant with a body like that. If she's pregnant, I think you should keep the baby. If not, the abortion will strain her body, and it'll be even more difficult for her to get pregnant in the future. Ethan's fingers dug into his palm. A long while later, he spoke in a low voice, what if the child wasn't mine? Chris had a look of disbelief on his face. He almost blurted, amazing, out loud. He could barely believe that Olivia had cheated on Ethan. Ahem, that's not quite possible. Everyone knows that you're the person she loves the most. How can she do something like that? Ethan ended the call. He didn't want to acknowledge it, either. But that was the truth. He had never touched Olivia, but she had gotten pregnant. He wondered if it was Colin or Avery. At the thought of that possibility, he felt extremely furious. He wished he could just question Olivia about it right now. His remaining sense of reason told him not to do it. His relationship with Olivia was risky right now. It wouldn't be able to endure another crisis. Even if he wanted to abort the child, he wouldn't tell Olivia about it in case she did something extreme. Ethan combed his fingers through his dense hair. He couldn't believe that a proud man like him would have to silently endure the betrayal of the woman he loved. Compared to betrayal and separation, he would rather pretend that nothing happened. At least he could still see Olivia every day. It would be much better than seeing her smiling by someone else's side. He finally understood what it felt like to be betrayed. He felt like someone had stabbed him in a spot he couldn't see. There were no injuries, but he was in so much pain that he couldn't even breathe. It hurt so much. His eyes turned red as his mind was filled with images of Olivia sleeping with some other man. Crash! He swept all the things on the desk onto the floor. A dagger fell at his feet. Bending over, Ethan picked it up. Unsheathing the dagger, he cut his left hand. Blood instantly stained his white shirt. It hurt. But he didn't understand why his heart hurt even more. He couldn't understand why Olivia would betray him. She was the woman he loved the most. When Ethan came back into the room, Olivia, who was on the bed, opened her eyes and looked at him. In the darkness, she could see Ethan's tall figure walking near her. She said in annoyance, "What is it this time?" Before she could finish speaking, the man's footsteps hastened. He pulled her into his embrace. Then, she heard his suppressed voice speaking in her ear. "Liv, it hurts so much." Chapter 446. Olivia frowned. She wondered what Ethan was up to again, running over to her and saying nonsensical stuff. Stretching out her right hand, she wanted to push his suffocating body away. But when her fingers touched his body, she felt something wet. It was blood. She was very sensitive to such smells now. Turning on the lights, Olivia saw the blood seeping into his white shirt. He didn't leave the villa. Olivia didn't understand how he would turn out like this. Who did this? Ethan didn't seem to mind it at all. Instead, he reached out to touch her face. "Liv, I hurt your hand, so I'll make it up to you with my arm. Don't be mad at me anymore, okay?" There seemed to be an abnormal thirst in his gaze. Olivia was speechless. "Are you out of your mind?" Ethan didn't deny that. With bloodied fingers, he touched Olivia's face. "Yes, I'm crazy. Liv, you can do anything to me as long as you don't leave me. Even kill you." Blood streamed from his fingertips, dripping along her face. His smile was extra gentle. "I'm not scared of death, but I'm scared that I won't see you again after I die. Liv, don't leave me." Looking at the blood dripping on the sheets, Olivia was instantly furious. Get lost. She had once heard from Ethan that his mother had severe mental illness. Whenever she had her bouts, she would start harming herself. Ethan had been mourning his sister's death for the past few years. He also had to deal with the problems of his marriage. His mental health wouldn't be much better than Leia's. Moreover, that sort of mental illness was usually caused by genetic issues. Ethan was beginning to display signs of self-harm. Looking at the alarming color of blood, Olivia feared that he might harm her as well. She subconsciously protected the yet unformed child, not daring to provoke Ethan too much. "No matter what it is you want to say, let's get you bandaged first. Even if you don't want to sleep, I do. Look, you're smearing the sheets with blood. I'm sorry, Liv, I can't quite control it. I'll wipe it clean for you right away." Reaching out, he tried to wipe the sheets, but it only got worse. It was just like his relationship with Olivia. The more he tried to mend it, the more he was pushing her away instead. Olivia felt nauseous. Ignoring Ethan, she hastily ran to the bathroom to throw up. She hated blood. She would never forget the day when she bled heavily while giving birth prematurely. Her child had disappeared in the pool of blood. Ethan wanted to pat her on the back to soothe her. But when Olivia saw his blood-streaked body, she retched even more violently. "Stay away from me. It's disgusting." Ethan watched her from a distance away. His eyes were filled with heartache. This was how much she suffered when she got pregnant back then. She would throw up everything she ate. But he knew nothing of it. Despite everything, Ethan still cared for Olivia. When his mind had cleared a little, he turned around and left to bandage his wounds. Olivia was speechless as she looked at the blood in the room. She had no idea what he was getting at. She went to another room and then opened the windows. Taking in the fresh flowery air, she felt the restlessness in her heart dissipating a little. After the ordeal, Ethan had disappeared. Olivia couldn't be bothered to go look for him. She didn't know how conflicted Ethan was feeling. He kept wishing that the child was his. He would treat Olivia the way he should have done in the past, and he would make it up to her. But then, he thought about her getting pregnant with another man's child. He felt like a monster was trying to get out of his body. He tried his best to suppress it, but the monster tore at his flesh and roared like crazy. Blood. He wished he could use the child's blood as an offering to the monster known as jealousy. His handsome face gradually became twisted. Chapter 447. After Ethan learned of Olivia's pregnancy, he spent every second in pain and suffering. He suppressed the beast, hiding deep within his heart, fearing that it might hurt Olivia. Even so, the rage in his chest only grew stronger. His jealousy had changed him. He asked himself time and again why the child wasn't his. He wouldn't have to suffer so much if he was the father. As Brent bandaged Ethan's wounds, he said, "Mr. Miller, please calm down. Please stop hurting yourself." Ethan smiled bitterly. "Brent, if it were you, what would you do?" "Mr. Miller, I don't have a wife yet, so I won't make assumptions. I can't give you any useful advice." Brent knew that Ethan was like a tired person driving on the highway. His whole body was tense. If he so much as slacked off for even a moment, he might very well die. Brent didn't dare suggest anything, nor was he able to. Olivia and Ethan had turned out like this, mainly because of Leia. Both women were important to Ethan. No matter how terrible Leia was, she was the sister Ethan had searched for years. He also felt like he had wronged her. If he didn't remove this thorn from his flesh, Olivia would never forgive him. Still, what I wanted to say was that Mrs. Miller has already lost a child. She took a long time to heal herself. She loves children so much, and this child is essentially her lifeline. If you do anything to her child, I'm afraid that. Brent felt that things would only get worse from here on out. As a bystander, he didn't want to see things end up that way. "I know. Of course, I know that." He had just learned from Mona how Olivia pulled through. Olivia cared about the baby more than anyone else did. But I can't stand the thought of her being pregnant with another man's child. If I don't get rid of the child early on when they grow up, I'll treat them like a sign of Liv's betrayal. I will be in constant pain. Brent patted Ethan on the back of his hand. "Mr. Miller, calm down. Can't you try to accept this child?" Seeing Ethan's face filled with pain, Brent felt like he couldn't sit by and watch anymore. He slowly tried to coax Ethan out of it. "Also, you and Mrs. Miller are already divorced. She's a free person now. After the hurt and betrayal she experienced from you, it's not wrong for her to look for an alternative." At that, Brent glanced carefully at Ethan. Ethan frowned deeply. "Was I that cruel to her in the past?" "Yes. So I deserve to end up like this." "Mr. Miller, I don't mean it like that. I just wanted to say that since it has happened, we can't change anything anymore. The only thing you can do is accept it and try to change your current situation. Try to ease your relationship with her." Brent said that he wouldn't give any suggestions, but he was trying to change Ethan's mind. If Ethan truly loved her, he had to love the child in her tummy as well. If not, hurting the child would be the same as hurting her. This was the best solution in Brent's eyes. He couldn't just let Olivia get on the operating table again and suffer another trauma. Ethan leaned against the chair with his face turned upward. He let Brent bandage him, and the expression on his face was unfathomable. Brent didn't dare say another word. Ethan needed time to think about this issue. If Ethan couldn't get over this, Olivia would eventually be in danger. But if Ethan truly did what he planned, he would never be able to mend their relationship. As a bystander, Brent was also worried about the two. He sighed. He could only hope that things would go well for the two after this. He glanced at Ethan's injured arm. If this kept up, Ethan would end up like his mother. He would turn into a real maniac who hurt not only himself but also the people around him. Chapter 448. After Ethan's outburst, Olivia never saw him in the next few days. She felt increasingly uneasy. She had a feeling that he had sensed something. But he would have gone crazy if he knew that she was pregnant. He would silently ensure that she was well fed every day. Her meals had increased lately. Also, she didn't know if it was just her, but she felt like the food was all very nutritious. Olivia had asked Mona about it. Mona said that she was the one who told the kitchen staff to prepare the meals this way. After all, Olivia had a hard time with her pregnancy, and she threw up very often. So, she needed to eat more. Without Ethan around, the Manor of Roses was eerily quiet every day. But Olivia had a feeling that it was just the calm before the storm. Noticing Olivia's suspicious look every day, Mona couldn't help but chuckle. "Miss Fordham, you're overthinking it. I heard that the Carltons are eager for marriage. Also, even though Marina is in ill health, she has a lot of requests. Even in that state, she asked for a wedding photo shoot. She must be pestering Mr. Miller so much that he couldn't leave." Every day after Olivia fell asleep, Ethan would sneak in at night. He would watch over her, who was sleeping soundly. Mona didn't want to cause Olivia any unnecessary mental burdens. So, she didn't tell Olivia the truth. Olivia had slept a lot lately. Her sleep quality had improved a lot, so she didn't notice Ethan coming in. Right, he's getting married soon. Olivia realized that after she had the child, her whole attention was on the baby. She didn't even care that much about Leia anymore. She only knew that Ethan had contained Leia in a villa in the mountains. There was a whole medical team dedicated to treating her mental issues. Olivia wouldn't be seeing Leia anytime soon, so she had to give up on revenge for now. While they spoke, a maid came in with some fruit and yogurt parfait. Olivia felt like she was pampered like a queen every day. The kitchen would always prepare something new for her. "Eat more, Miss Fordham. You've been throwing up a lot these days." Other pregnant women would get plumper, but look how thin you are right now. Olivia didn't have much of an appetite, but she had to eat for the sake of her child. "But I heard that mothers throw up because their bodies are rejecting the child. This means that your baby is healthy." When Olivia heard the word, healthy, she smiled faintly. "They will grow up well, I'm sure." If she could give birth to another adorable and healthy baby, she would have no regrets in her life. At the thought of the baby, her churning stomach didn't feel that painful anymore. She gritted her teeth. She believed that she could get through this. She had to eat more for the child's sake. After Olivia finished the parfait, the maid quickly served some exquisite cakes. Lying on the bed, Olivia finished the cakes lazily. Right after that, delicious fresh fruits were brought to her. Unbeknownst to her, Ethan was in an office. He was recording her daily diet in detail. Miss Fordham threw up 4 times today. Her appetite isn't too great, but she perked up and ate everything you sent her. All right, ask her what she would like to eat for dinner. Get the kitchen to prepare it. Understood, Mr. Miller. Before ending the call, Ethan asked, "How many days has it been since she got pregnant?" "Probably more than 20 days. What's the matter, Mr. Miller?" "Nothing. I just wanted to know when she'll be getting her pregnancy test." Ethan hung up. It had been more than 20 days. Calculating the days, he realized that Avery had appeared around that period. He wondered if the two hit it off right on their first meeting. He covered his face with one hand, his other hand clenched tightly into a fist. He was now convinced that the child belonged to Avery. Chapter 449. Ethan had brought Olivia and Jeff back from the island in a hurry. Ever since then, he didn't pay much attention to Avery. Ethan did hear that Avery had gone back to his home country, though. By the looks of it, Avery didn't intend to return to Aldenvine and take Olivia from him. In other words, Olivia was probably a toy Avery played with on a whim. He wasn't sincere at all. Ethan was extremely furious about it. The woman he loved the most was pregnant with someone else's child, but that someone didn't even care about it. Ethan didn't know how he should treat Olivia. For the past few days, he tried to convince himself to accept it. But his mind couldn't let go of the thought that the child wasn't his. He couldn't peacefully treat the child as his own. In another 20 days or so, Olivia would be able to undergo the operation. Olivia's health wasn't too great, and she looked very thin. She needed to nourish her body before the operation. Once again, Ethan asked someone to deliver a bunch of nourishing ingredients to the villa. After the meal, Jeff wanted to say something, but he hesitated. Looking at him, Olivia said, "Dad, just tell me if you have something to say." After some more hesitation, Jeff finally spoke up. "Liv, Are you mad at Ethan because of your wrist? When I woke up, I realized that there was something off about your relationship. He tries his best to please you, but you won't even spare him a glance. Also, he doesn't come home for dinner these days. He's always avoiding you. Olivia replied, Dad, it's true that there are some grudges between us. He's avoiding me because he knows that I'm mad. Liv, you liked him so much in the past. How did you turn out like this? No one can be flawless for life. It's okay as long as he admits his mistakes and changes his ways. Olivia couldn't tell him about her pain. Also, she wasn't feeling well because of her pregnancy, so she was annoyed as well. She didn't feel like explaining too much. Dad, there's nothing wrong between us. Don't worry. But, Dad, I'm very tired. I want to rest now. Jeff could sense that there was something off about Olivia these days. She got angry very easily. When Ethan visited him, he told Ethan about this. Ethan patiently comforted him. Don't worry about us, Mr. Fordham. Liv is in a bad mood, so she doesn't want to see me. I'll just avoid her and wait until she's not mad anymore. I'm so sorry for the trouble. You're being too serious, Mr. Fordham. Come, let me help you walk a few steps. Jeff could already walk a short distance with help. Even though it was a slow process, he was recovering better than expected. Ethan could also rest assured. The better Jeff got, the less guilty he would feel about it. After comforting Jeff, Ethan crept into Olivia's room. For the past few nights, he had been checking in on Olivia after she had fallen asleep. He didn't know how to face her. Like right now, every time he saw Olivia, he would think about some other man's child in her tummy. What are you doing here? Olivia immediately got into bed. She covered her tummy with her blanket, subconsciously trying to protect it. I'm here to visit you. There's nothing to visit. I'm doing fine. Olivia gripped the blanket tightly. Are you going to go crazy again? She vividly remembered the bloodied Ethan that night. She had thrown up violently then. Even now, she felt like she was retching when she imagined the smell of blood. Don't be scared, Liv. Olivia's expression was earnest. Ethan, why don't you get some treatment together with your sister? You are sick, too, and I mean it. Chapter 450. When Ethan saw the wariness in Olivia's eyes, he knew that she treated him more like an enemy than a lover. Ethan sighed. Don't worry, Liv, I won't do anything to you. I came here today to tell you that your favorite musician, Amadeus, is holding a concert here. I bought tickets, so let's attend the concert tomorrow. Olivia stared at Ethan suspiciously, wondering if he was plotting something again. Liv, I don't mean anything else. Amadeus hasn't made an appearance for the past few years. I know that you've always liked him, and this concert may be the last one he's holding for good. I don't want you to miss it. Speaking of, it had been 2 years and 6 months since Olivia attended any concert at all. The last time she attended an event like this was the Fruit Jam Music Festival 3 years ago. Olivia and Ethan were wearing matching outfits, and they both wore caps. As she stood among the young people, she sang along to her heart's content. Back then, she was cheerful and adorable, and she was extremely vibrant. She had the unique liveliness of people her age. But now, she was lifeless. There wasn't any light in her eyes. She no longer had the vibrant liveliness of her age. Seeing that Olivia had remained silent, Ethan placed the tickets on the table. He said in a gentle voice, Liv, I know that you've suffered a lot for the past 2 years. You can hate me and complain about me, but no one can change what has already happened. I only wish for you to move past the pain. Olive replied curtly, Got it. I'll go. I'm tired now. Ethan didn't bother her any longer. He turned around and left. Olivia touched her flat tummy. Because of the stress she endured in the past 2 years, she had lost the positivity of normal people. She was filled with nothing but negative thoughts. It was fine if it were just her, but now, she had a new life budding in her tummy. She had to be considerate of her child. The best prenatal education would be maintaining a good mood every day. She couldn't be too sullen. After all, a child and their mother are connected. Since she had ended up with this young life, she had to take responsibility for them. In the dark, Olivia curled her body up. She looked like a shrimp. She had already gotten used to this posture ever since she lost her previous child. She gazed at the faint streetlights outside, a dazed expression on her face. After experiencing all those things, she wondered if she could still be a normal mother. Her future was shrouded in stormy clouds. No one knew what would become of it. Olivia swore in her heart, "My baby, I swear I'll protect you this time." The next afternoon, Olivia opened her wardrobe to pick out an outfit she would wear to the concert. Her wardrobe was filled with various clothes, unlike the way it had looked before her divorce. To torture her, Ethan had asked people to take away all her luxury bags and clothes. Now, items from all the luxury brands in the world had gathered in her wardrobe. The tags were taken off, and the clothes were even washed and ironed. They hung in neat rows on the racks. As soon as she opened the wardrobe, she was greeted by the natural fragrance coming from the sachet. In the past 2 years, Olivia was used to wearing cheap clothes she got online. It had been a long while since she dressed up properly. Looking at the pretty dresses, she let her fingers run gently across them. The clothes were high quality in both tailoring and fabric. She suddenly felt the urge to cry. She used to be a woman who was pampered from a young age. Jeff even got a mentor to teach her etiquette. She was a carefree princess, and she lacked nothing. But now, she couldn't believe the fear and uneasiness she felt when she touched the smooth fabric. This princess had long since fallen into the mud. Like a beggar, she became worried about everything.